Hello, survivors. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the story. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to our channel. We appreciate it, and thank you in advance. Please leave the name of the city you're listening from in the comment section below. It helps us see our reach in the community. Let's start the story. What happened in Cartridge Ferry during those first 12 hours changed everything. I thought I knew about survival, about my neighbors, and about myself. October had been unusually cold that year, and by 8 p.m. the rain was already hammering our little town of 1,500 souls. I was down in my basement, cleaning the barrel of my Springfield M1A when the first emergency alert pierced through the static on my police scanner. Multiple disturbances, Main Street. Unknown assailants. All units respond. The scanner crackled again. Unit 7, we need backup at the diner. People are... Christ, what the hell are they doing? I set down the rifle and turned up the volume. In 23 years of living in Cartridge Ferry, I'd never heard panic in Officer Davies' voice. The man had served 2 tours in Afghanistan before coming back to keep the peace in our quiet corner of rural Montana. Whatever was happening had shaken him badly. My basement stretched beneath the entire house, lined floor to ceiling with gun safes, ammunition crates, and display cases. 67 firearms total, ranging from my great-grandfather's Civil War Colt Navy to the AR-15 platform I'd built myself last spring. My ex-wife Liza used to call it an obsession. "Why do you need so many guns, Ryan? You think the world's ending?" The scanner erupted again. Shots fired. Shots fired at the pharmacy, multiple casualties. I was already moving, pulling on my boots when the pounding started on my front door. Heavy, desperate knocks that made the whole frame shake. Through the peephole, I saw Jack Brown, the town mechanic, his work shirt torn and bloody. "Ryan, open up, you gotta help us." I unlatched the deadbolt and Jack stumbled inside, followed by Mrs. Klugman from down the street, and Theo Caruso, who ran the hardware store. Their faces were pale, eyes wide with something I'd never seen before in people I'd known my entire life. "What's happening out there?" I asked, but Jack was already heading for my basement stairs. "You still got all those guns down there?" he demanded. "We're gonna need them, all of them." Mrs. Klugman, a 70-year-old retired teacher who'd never said a harsh word about anyone, grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "Ryan, they're not people anymore. The Petersons, the Kowalskis, even little Emily from the flower shop. They're attacking everyone they see." "Attacking how?" I followed them downstairs, my heart hammering against my ribs. Theo's voice shook as he described what they'd witnessed. Billy Lapira bit chunk out of his own wife's neck. Didn't stop even when she was screaming. His eyes were all wrong, like milk had been poured over them. But he could still see us, still track our movement. In my basement, Jack was already examining my rifle collection with the efficiency of someone who knew weapons. He'd been a Marine before returning to Millbrook to take over his father's garage. "This is good stuff, Ryan, real good." He hefted my Remington 700. "How much ammunition you got?" I gestured to the steel cabinets along the far wall. 12,000 rounds, various calibers. Been stockpiling for years." Mrs. Klugman's eyes widened. 12,000? I like to be prepared. I was already loading magazines, muscle memory taking over. "Jack, what exactly are we dealing with here?" "I don't know what to call them," he admitted, checking the action on a Winchester Model 70, "but they don't feel pain." Paul Marino emptied half a clip into one of them, and it kept coming, only stopped when he put 2 in the head. The scanner on my workbench continued its stream of panicked reports. "The school's been breached. Repeat, the elementary school has been breached." "That's where my sister works night maintenance," Theo said, his voice barely a whisper. Mrs. Klugman was struggling with the weight of a Mossberg 590. "I haven't fired a gun since my husband took me hunting in 1987. "It's like riding a bicycle," I told her, adjusting the stock. "Point, breathe, squeeze. These shells will put down anything that moves wrong." Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the basement windows like fingers tapping urgently on glass. Through the narrow panes, I could see shapes moving in the darkness beyond my property line, shambling forms that didn't walk like people should walk, Jack had found my tactical vest and was loading it with spare magazines. We can't just sit here and wait for them to break in. There are other people out there who need help. You're talking about going out there, I said. In this weather. In the dark. Against God knows what. I'm talking about saving our town. His voice carried the authority of someone used to making life or death decisions. Ryan, you've got enough firepower here to outfit a small army. We can do this. Theo was at the window, pressing his face against the rain-streaked glass. There's more of them coming up the street, moving in a group but not together, like they're all going to the same place but can't coordinate getting there. I climbed on a chair to look out. 8 figures moved through the downpour, their clothes torn and hanging in tatters. Even from this distance, I could see the wrongness in their movements. Arms that swayed without purpose, heads that lolled, feet that dragged and stumbled but never quite fell. One of them turned toward my house, and for a moment its face caught the streetlight. What had once been Mrs. Logan from the corner market now wore skin the color of old ash, her mouth hanging open in a permanent silent scream. Dark fluid ran from her eyes and nose, mixing with the rain. Jesus Christ, I breathed. Mrs. Klugman had managed to load the shotgun and was holding it with grim determination. My herald always said evil would come to test us someday. I just never thought it would look like our neighbors. The scanner crackled again. All units. Downtown area is completely overrun. Retreat to the county line and establish a perimeter. Do not engage unless absolutely necessary. They're abandoning the town, Jack said flatly. I made my decision. From the gun safe, I pulled my modified AR-15, the one I'd spent 3 months perfecting. 30-round magazines, red dot sight, tactical flashlight. I loaded 4 magazines and clipped them to my vest. Theo, you take the Winchester. Good range, reliable action. Mrs. Klugman, keep that shotgun. Jack, what's your preference? He pointed to my M1A. That'll do nicely. I handed out boxes of ammunition, watching these ordinary people transform into something else. Theo's hands stopped shaking as he loaded the rifle. Mrs. Klugman's fear crystallized into cold determination. Jack checked his weapon with professional precision. We're really doing this, Theo said. It wasn't a question. We're doing this, I confirmed. But we do it smart. Stay together, watch each other's backs, and aim for the head. No heroics, no unnecessary risks. The pounding on my front door started again, but this time it was different. Rhythmic, mindless, like someone hammering nails without caring what they hit. Through the scanner came a sound that made my skin crawl. Low, wet moaning that seemed to go on forever. Jack was already heading upstairs. Time to go hunting. We emerged into the October night, rain immediately soaking through our clothes despite the jackets we'd thrown on. The air carried a smell I'd never encountered before. Sweet rot mixed with something metallic that coated the back of my throat. Main Street stretched before us, normally lit by antique street lamps that gave our little downtown a Norman Rockwell charm. Tonight, half the lights were out, leaving pools of darkness between the struggling illumination. In those shadows, things moved with nothing to do with human intention. Stay tight, Jack whispered. Ryan, you take point. Theo, watch our 6. Mrs. Klugman, stay in the middle. The first one we encountered had been Davy Furman, who'd sold me my truck 2 years ago. Now he lurched toward us with arms outstretched, his chest cavity torn open and glistening in the streetlight. His eyes had gone completely white, but somehow he tracked our movement with perfect accuracy. I raised my rifle, centered the red dot on his forehead, and squeezed the trigger. The shot echoed off the storefront buildings, and Davy dropped like a bag of potatoes. One down, I said, but my voice sounded strange in my own ears. Mrs. Klugman was staring at the body. That was Davy Furman. Not anymore, Jack said quietly. Whatever these things are, the people we knew are gone. From the direction of the school came screaming, human screaming that cut through the rain like a blade. Without discussion, we started running. The elementary school sat at the end of Maple Street, a single-story brick building that had educated 3 generations of Cartridge Ferry children. Tonight, Its windows glowed with emergency lighting and shapes pressed against the glass from inside. Theo's sister, Mrs. Klugman reminded us. We found the front doors hanging open, the security chain snapped. Inside, the hallways echoed with sounds that belonged in nightmares. Wet, tearing noises punctuated by guttural moaning that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Split up, Jack decided. Theo, you and Mrs. Klugman check the east wing. Ryan and I'll take the west. Anyone find survivors, you yell. The west hallway stretched before us, lined with children's artwork that now seemed grotesquely cheerful. Our footsteps echoed on polished linoleum as we moved past empty classrooms, sweeping each doorway with tactical precision. We found Theo's sister in the janitor's closet, what was left of her. Jack pulled me back before I could see too much, but the image burned itself into my memory anyway. When we regrouped with Theo and Mrs. Klugman, Jack simply shook his head. Theo's face went through several expressions before settling on something cold and final. How many bullets you got left, Ryan? Plenty, I told him. Good, because I want to kill every last one of these things. We spent the next hour methodically clearing the school, room by room. We found 6 more of them, including the principal and 2 teachers I'd known since elementary school. Each shot felt like closing a door that could never be opened again. By midnight, the rain had turned to a steady downpour that reduced visibility to maybe 20 feet. We'd made our way back to Main Street, where more shapes wandered between the buildings. The infected, that's what we started calling them, seemed drawn to sound and movement, but they showed no intelligence, no ability to plan or coordinate. They're just meat now, Jack observed, reloading his rifle. Dangerous meat, but still just meat. Mrs. Klugman had stopped shaking hours ago. Now she moved with the confidence of someone who'd found her purpose. My Harold would be proud, she said, chambering another shell. Never thought I'd be hunting monsters at my age. We cleared the diner, the post office, and the small medical clinic. Each building held its own horrors. People we'd known transformed into shambling nightmares that had to be put down like rabid animals. But with each shot, with each small victory, something changed in our group. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were winning. As we reached the intersection of Main and Church Streets, Tom pointed toward the residential area. Looks like there's more activity over there. Through the rain, we could see lights moving in house windows, and the distant sound of breaking glass carried on the wind. More screaming, but also something else. Gunfire from other parts of town. Other people are fighting back, Jake said with satisfaction. I checked my ammunition count. Still plenty, and we hadn't even touched the reserves back at my house. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something like optimism. Then let's go help them, I said. The rain continued to fall as we moved deeper into the residential streets. 4 ordinary people who discovered something extraordinary about themselves in the space of 4 hours. We weren't running anymore. We were hunting. The residential streets of Cartridge Ferry spread out before us like a maze of horrors waiting to be discovered. By midnight, we'd learned to read the signs. Broken windows meant struggle. Dark houses with open doors meant death. And the flickering of flashlights behind curtains meant hope. We need to cover more ground, Jack said, wiping rain from his rifle scope. Split into pairs, sweep house by house. Radio check every 30 minutes. I handed out the walkie-talkies I'd grabbed from my emergency kit. The plan was simple. Jack and I would take the north side of Elm Street while Theo and Mrs. Klugman covered the south. We'd work our way toward the center of town, clearing as we went. Remember, I told them, we're not just hunting these things. We're looking for survivors. Mrs. Klugman adjusted her grip on the Mossberg. And if we find someone who's been bitten? The question hung in the air like smoke. Jack answered with the cold pragmatism of someone who'd made harder decisions in foreign wars. Then we put them down before they turn, no exceptions. Theo nodded grimly. My sister would understand. We split up at the intersection, and Jack and I headed toward the Morrison house on Pine Avenue. The rain had intensified, turning the unpaved side streets into muddy streams that sucked at our boots with every step. Lightning flickered in the distance, illuminating the town in brief, stark moments that revealed too much. The Morrison place sat dark and silent, its front door hanging open like a mouth frozen mid-scream. Jack signaled for me to cover the rear while he approached from the front. Through the kitchen window, I could see overturned furniture and dark stains on the linoleum that weren't spilled coffee. My radio crackled. "North side clear," Jack whispered, coming around back. Inside, we found what was left of the Morrison family. 3 of them, huddled in the living room where they'd made their last stand. The family patriarch, Old Man Morrison, still clutched a hunting rifle with an empty chamber. His wife lay beside him, her reading glasses shattered but somehow still perched on her nose. Their son Danny sat propped against the fireplace, and for a moment I thought he was alive. Then he turned toward us and I saw that half his face had been torn away, his remaining eye fixed on Jack with the kind of focus that had nothing to do with human recognition. Jack put him down with a single shot to the head. "That's what they were protecting," he said, pointing to a crawl space under the stairs. From inside came the sound of whimpering. We found Jenny Bridges, Danny's 8-year-old daughter, curled up with her grandmother's old quilt. She was unharmed but catatonic, staring at us with eyes that had seen too much. I carried her outside while Jack secured the house. "We can't take her with us," he said quietly. "Not where we're going." "Then where?" I demanded. Before he could answer, gunfire erupted from the direction of the Methodist church 3 blocks away. Long, sustained bursts that suggested someone with serious firepower was making a stand. Through the radio came Theo's voice, tight with adrenaline. "We've got survivors at the church. Big group, maybe 20 people, but they're surrounded." Jack took the girl from my arms. "St. Mary's has a basement. Stone walls, 1 entrance. Take her there, then meet us at the church." I wanted to argue, but the sound of automatic weapons fire was growing more sporadic. People were dying while we debated. I ran through the rain with Jenny Bridges clutching my neck, her small body shaking with each thunderclap. The wind howled through the empty streets, carrying with it the sounds of distant screaming and the wet slapping of footsteps that belonged to things that should no longer walk. St. Mary's Catholic Church sat on a hill overlooking the town center, its heavy oak doors reinforced with iron bands from the pioneer days. The bell tower loomed above us like a stone sentinel, its bronze bell silent for the first time in over a century. Father McKenna met me at the entrance, his clerical collar askew and a double-barreled shotgun in his hands. "Ryan, thank God you're armed. We've got 12 people in the basement, but those things keep testing our defenses." I handed him Jenny, who immediately attached herself to his cassock like a lost kitten. The priest's weathered face softened as he looked down at the traumatized child, his free hand gently stroking her tangled hair. "Father, I need you to keep her safe. We're clearing the town, but it's going to get worse before it gets better." "You're going back out there?" His voice carried the weight of someone who'd been giving last rites all night, who'd watched his flock scatter like sheep before wolves. "Someone has to." I checked my ammunition count, still good, but I was starting to understand why I'd stockpiled so much over the years. "How many rounds you got for that scattergun?" 50 shells, maybe 60. Mrs. Patterson brought her late husband's hunting supplies. Through the church windows, I could see muzzle flashes from the direction of the Methodist church. The gunfire was definitely decreasing in volume. We were running out of time. I made my way back through streets that looked like a war zone. Abandoned cars sat with their doors flung open, some still running with their headlights cutting through the rain. Bodies lay scattered on sidewalks and front lawns, some moving with the wrong kind of life, others mercifully still. The Methodist church was a fortress under siege. 23 survivors had barricaded themselves inside, using pews to block windows and doors. They had hunting rifles, a few handguns, and enough ammunition to hold out for a while. But the infected kept coming, drawn by the noise and the scent of living flesh like sharks to blood in the water. I found Jack, Theo, and Mrs. Klugman crouched behind a row of parked cars across the street, picking off stragglers with methodical precision. The asphalt around them was littered with spent brass casings that glinted in the intermittent lightning. "Situation report," I said, sliding in beside them. "Bad and getting worse," Theo replied. We counted at least 40 of those things surrounding the church. Every time the people inside shoot one, the noise draws more. Mrs. Klugman was reloading her shotgun with practiced efficiency, her movements now carrying the confidence of someone who'd found her calling in the chaos. The pastor, Reverend Wilms, he's trying to coordinate from inside, but they're running low on ammunition. Through my rifle scope, I could see infected pressed against every window of the church, their fingers leaving bloody smears on the glass as they clawed for entry. Some had been neighbors I'd known my entire life. Mrs. Kowalski from the post office, her postal uniform torn and stained. Young Brad Fisher, who'd delivered my newspaper every morning for 3 years, now dragging one leg behind him like a broken marionette. We go in hard and fast, Jack decided. Ryan, you and I create a distraction on the north side. Theo, Mrs. Klugman, you circle around and hit them from the rear. When we've thinned them out enough, we signal the people inside to open up. It was a good plan. It was also likely to get us killed. We launched our assault at 2:30 a.m., under cover of a lightning storm that masked our approach. I opened up with my AR-15 on full auto, raking the crowd of infected from 50 yards out. The noise was deafening, but it had the desired effect. Every zombie within earshot turned toward us like compass needles finding north. Jack was beside me, his M1A cracking out steady shots that dropped infected with precision. Behind the church, I could hear Mrs. Klugman's shotgun booming and Theo's Winchester adding to the carnage. But for every zombie we dropped, 2 more seemed to take its place. They came shambling out of side streets and from behind buildings, drawn by the gunfire like moths to flame. Some were fresh, still wearing the clothes they'd died in. Others showed signs of longer decay, their skin hanging in tatters and bones showing through rotted flesh. One of them got close enough for me to see details I wished I couldn't. It had been Maria Santos, who'd run the flower shop next to the post office. Half her scalp was missing, exposing gray brain matter that glistened in the lightning flashes. But her eyes still tracked movement with predatory focus, and her teeth were stained with fresh blood that wasn't her own. I put 3 rounds on the chest before remembering that only headshots worked. The 4th shot took off the top of her skull, and she dropped like a stone. "Reloading!" I shouted, dropping the empty magazine. That's when everything went wrong. The church doors burst open and people started streaming out, panic overriding whatever coordination Reverend Williams had tried to maintain. They ran in all directions, scattering like leaves in the wind. Some had weapons, others just terror. I watched in horror as Janet Connolly, the town librarian, tripped and fell directly into a group of infected. Her screams lasted exactly 7 seconds before they were cut off in a wet, tearing sound that I'll hear for the rest of my life. The sight of her cardigan, the same cheerful yellow one she'd worn to every town council meeting, disappearing beneath a mass of grasping hands and gnashing teeth, was more than my mind wanted to process. "Fall back," Jack was shouting. "Fall back to the hardware store." Theo's Winchester had gone silent. Through the chaos, I could see him struggling hand to hand with something that had once been Bob Kitch, the bank manager. The infected man's business suit was shredded, his tie hanging loose around a throat that had been torn open, and then somehow healed wrong. Mrs. Klugman was trying to help, but there were too many infected between them and us. A writhing mass of bodies. I made a decision that still haunts me. Instead of trying to save Theo, I grabbed Jack and we ran for cover. Behind us, Theo's screams joined the general cacophony of the night. We regrouped at Theo's hardware store, along with 8 survivors from the church. Mrs. Klugman had made it out, but she'd taken a deep gash across her forehead that was bleeding steadily, the red mixing with rainwater to create pink rivulets down her face. Reverend Wilms was there, still clutching his Bible in one hand and a .38 revolver in the other, his usual sermon composure replaced by something harder and more primal. "We lost 15 people," he said, his voice hollow. 15 souls who trusted me to keep them safe." "You can't save everyone," Jack told him. "We learned that the hard way tonight." I was checking Mrs. Klugman's wound when she grabbed my wrist. "Theo saved me," she whispered. "That boy threw himself between me and 3 of those things. bought me time to get away. Outside, the infected had lost interest in us and were wandering back toward the main part of town. Through the store windows, we could see them silhouetted against the burning remains of the gas station on Main Street. Someone had knocked over a fuel pump, and the resulting fire cast everything in hellish orange light. "How many rounds do we have left?" Reverend Wilms asked, his voice carrying a new edge that suggested he'd found God in the barrel of a gun. I did a quick inventory. Between all of us, maybe 200 rounds of mixed ammunition. Not nearly enough if we had to fight our way back to my house for resupply. "We need to be smarter," I said. "Pick our battles. Conserve ammunition. These things are drawn to noise and movement, but they're not intelligent. We can use that." Jack was studying a map of Cartridge Ferry that Theo had kept behind the counter. "If we can get back to Ryan's place, rearm and resupply, we might be able to finish this thing." "Finish it?" Mrs. Patterson, one of the church survivors, looked at us like we were insane. "There's hundreds of them out there." "Not hundreds," I corrected. Theo and I did a rough count earlier, maybe 3. 400 infected total, out of 1,500 people in town. The math was brutal but encouraging. If we were right, we'd already killed at least 100 of them. With proper tactics and enough ammunition, we could actually clear the town. But first, we had to survive until dawn. The rain continued to fall as we planned our next move, washing the blood from the streets but not from our memories. Outside, things that had once been our neighbors wandered through the darkness, and somewhere in that chaos, Theo Caruso had become one of them, or worse, was still fighting against the inevitable transformation, trapped inside a body that no longer obeyed his commands. Mrs. Klugman was praying quietly, her lips moving in the rhythm of words I couldn't hear, occasionally punctuated by soft gasps of pain from her head wound. Reverend Wilms was cleaning his pistol with the methodical care of someone who'd found unexpected purpose in violence, each motion precise and reverent. And me? I was already planning our next assault, because somewhere between midnight and 3 a.m. I'd discovered something about myself that I never knew existed. I was good at this, and God help me. I was starting to enjoy it. The infected owned the darkness, but dawn was only 3 hours away. And when the sun came up, we were going to take our town back, one bullet at a time. The storm began to break around 4 in the morning, lightning giving way to a steady, drumming rain that turned the streets of Cartridge Ferry into rivers of mud and blood. From our position in Theo's hardware store, we could see the infected wandering aimlessly through the downtown area, their movements becoming more sluggish as the temperature dropped. "Cold slows them down," Jack observed, watching through the store's front window as a cluster of zombies stumbled past the pharmacy. "Makes them easier targets." I was inventorying our remaining ammunition when Mrs. Patterson, one of the church survivors, pointed toward the eastern hills that surrounded our town. "Look there, more lights." Through the pre-dawn gloom, we could see vehicle headlights moving along the mountain roads, not the scattered, panicked movement of fleeing civilians, but the steady, organized advance of a convoy. Military vehicles, by the look of them, approaching Cartridge Ferry from 3 different directions. "Cavalry's coming," Reverend Wilms said, but his voice carried no relief. "Question is, are they here to help or contain?" Mrs. Klugman lowered her binoculars with a grim expression. "Those aren't rescue vehicles. Look at the spacing, the formation. That's an encirclement pattern." She was right. The convoy was positioning itself to surround the entire town, cutting off all escape routes. Whatever was happening in Cartridge Ferry, the outside world had decided it needed to stay here. "How long before they're in position?" I asked. Jack consulted his watch. "Hour, maybe 90 minutes. They're taking their time, probably waiting for full daylight before they move in." That gave us a window, narrow, but enough to finish what we'd started. I made a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff into darkness. We complete the sweep. All of it. Every street, every house, every infected thing in this town dies before those soldiers get here. The others stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. "Ryan," Mrs. Klugman said gently, "there's still hundreds of them out there. We're 8 people with limited ammunition." "No," I corrected. feeling something cold and predatory unfurl in my chest. We're 8 hunters with intimate knowledge of our territory, and I've got enough firepower back at my house to arm a platoon. The plan was ambitious to the point of insanity. We would divide into 3 teams, each responsible for a section of town. Jack and I would take the residential area north of Main Street, where the density of infected seemed highest. Mrs. Klugman and Reverend Wilms would clear the commercial district, using the Reverend's knowledge of every building and alley. The remaining church survivors would form a mobile reserve, moving between teams as needed. But first, we had to get back to my house for weapons and ammunition. The journey across town became our first real test of coordinated zombie hunting. We moved in a diamond formation, with me at point and Jack covering our rear. Every infected we encountered was dispatched with calculated efficiency, no wasted shots. No unnecessary noise, just cold killing. By the time we reached my house on Birch Street, we'd put down 23 zombies without losing a single person. More importantly, we'd learned to read their behavior patterns. The infected were drawn to sound and movement, but they lacked any tactical intelligence. They couldn't learn, couldn't adapt, couldn't coordinate beyond the basic pack instinct that drew them together. They were predators, but we were becoming something else entirely. My basement arsenal had never looked more beautiful. Racks of rifles, crates of ammunition, tactical gear that I'd accumulated over years of careful preparation. I distributed weapons like a general arming his troops, scoped hunting rifles for long-range work, shotguns for close-quarters combat, sidearms for backup. "Jesus, Ryan," whispered Carl Henderson, one of the church survivors. "You could outfit a small army with this stuff." "That's exactly what we are," I replied. "Loading magazines. A small army." Mrs. Klugman was examining a Winchester 30-06 with professional interest. "My Harold would have loved this rifle. He always said the best hunting happened when you knew your prey better than they knew themselves." "These things aren't prey anymore," Jack corrected. "They're problems to be solved." We launched our systematic sweep at 5:30 a.m., just as the eastern sky began to show the first hints of gray dawn. The change in our tactics was immediate and dramatic. Instead of reacting to threats, we were creating them. Instead of running from infected, we were hunting them down with methodical precision. Jack and I moved through the Riverside neighborhood like a 2-man death squad. We'd perfected our communication to barely audible whispers and hand signals, coordinating our shots to eliminate entire groups of zombies without alerting others nearby. The infected had no answer for our tactics. They were used to chasing panicked prey, not being stalked by predators who understood their weaknesses. "House to house is working," Jack reported over the radio. "We've cleared 6 blocks, maybe 40 infected total. No sign of survivors." Mrs. Klugman's voice crackled back. "Commercial district is nearly clean. Found a group of 12 holed up in the bank vault. They're alive, scared but unharmed." The sun was beginning to rise when we encountered our first real challenge. The Cartridge Ferry Elementary School, the same building where we'd found Theo's sister the night before, had become an infected hive. Through the windows, we could see dozens of zombies wandering the hallways, drawn together by some instinct we didn't understand. "Looks like a nest," Jack observed. "Could be 50-60 of them in there." I checked my ammunition count. Still good, but this would require everything we'd learned about coordinated assault tactics. "Call in the reserve team. We're going to need everyone for this one." The attack on the school became our masterpiece of zombie warfare. We surrounded the building, then used controlled noise to funnel the infected toward predetermined kill zones. Car alarms, thrown rocks, even Mrs. Klugman's impressive repertoire of shouted insults. Anything to make them move where we wanted them. When they came streaming out of the main entrance, we were ready. Crossfire from 3 directions, overlapping fields of fire that created a shooting gallery of death. The infected fell in waves, their bodies piling up like cordwood in the school courtyard. But it was during this assault that we discovered the truth about what we'd become. I was reloading when I saw movement in my peripheral vision. One of the infected had gotten closer than it should have. A teenage girl whose school clothes were stained with blood that wasn't all her own. She lunged toward Carl Henderson, who was struggling with a jammed rifle. I could have taken the shot. Should have taken the shot. Instead, I found myself studying her approach, analyzing her movement patterns, curious about how close she'd get before Carl noticed the threat. It was Jack who put her down, his bullet taking off the top of her skull in a spray of brain matter and bone fragments. "What the hell was that?" he demanded. "You had a clear shot." I couldn't explain it. Couldn't put into words the cold calculation that had replaced normal human reaction. Somewhere during the night, the fear had burned away, leaving something harder and more focused in its place. By 7 a.m., we'd cleared the school and 3 surrounding blocks. The sun was now fully visible, painting the blood-soaked streets of Cartridge Ferry in golden light that seemed obscene after the horrors of the night. The military convoy was in position, surrounding our town with a ring of armored vehicles and soldiers in hazmat suits. "They're setting up a perimeter," Mrs. Klugman reported from her position on the church bell tower. "Looks like they're preparing for something big." That's when we saw them. Moving down Highway 89 from the north came a sight that made my blood run cold. Zombies, shambling, disorganized, infected we'd been fighting all night. They weren't from Cartridge Ferry. These were refugees from other towns, other outbreaks drawn by the sounds of gunfire and the scent of living flesh. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all converging on our small town like iron filings drawn to a magnet. "Jesus Christ," Jack breathed. "This thing is bigger than we thought." Through my rifle scope, I could see details that turned my stomach. These zombies showed signs of longer decay, suggesting they'd been infected for days or even weeks. Some were missing limbs, others had wounds that should have been fatal, but somehow kept moving. A few displayed damage patterns that suggested they'd encountered military resistance, bullet holes, burn marks, even what looked like shrapnel wounds. "The whole region is infected," Reverend Wilms said, his voice carrying the weight of terrible understanding. "We're not dealing with an isolated outbreak. This is widespread, maybe national." Mrs. Klugman was scanning the horizon with binoculars. "I count at least 3 separate groups approaching from different directions. We're about to be completely surrounded." The military vehicles were repositioning, turning their guns outward to face the approaching horde rather than inward toward us. Whatever containment mission they'd planned was being rapidly modified into a defensive operation. "What's our ammunition status?" I asked. The numbers were sobering. After 8 hours of continuous combat, we were down to maybe 300 rounds total. Enough for a last stand, but not nearly sufficient for what was coming. That's when I made the decision that would define the rest of my life. "We're not defending," I announced. "We're attacking." The others stared at me in disbelief. "Ryan," Mrs. Klugman said carefully, "those are thousands of infected out there. We can't survive a siege," I interrupted. "But we can break their formations before they establish a foothold. Hit them while they're still scattered, still vulnerable." Jack was nodding slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Mobile harassment, hit-and-run tactics." "Exactly. We know this terrain better than anything dead has a right to. We use that advantage." It was insane. It was also our only chance. We spent the next hour in frantic preparation. Every vehicle in town that still had fuel became a mobile firing platform. Pickup trucks with shooters in the bed, police cars with windows shot out for better firing angles. Even Mrs. Patterson's old farm truck loaded with ammunition and medical supplies. The attack began at exactly 8:15 a.m., with the sun bright enough to cast sharp shadows across the battlefield. We hit the northern group first, using the terrain features I'd known since childhood to create ambush points and escape routes. The infected had no answer for motorized warfare. They were used to cornering prey in buildings or open spaces, not dealing with targets that could strike from range and then disappear before they could respond. We carved through their formations like wolves among sheep, thinning their numbers and disrupting their advance. But it was during this running battle that I experienced the moment of revelation that still haunts my dreams. I was driving my pickup through a group of infected watching bodies explode against my reinforced bumper when I realized I was laughing. Not the hysterical laughter of someone losing their mind, but the genuine enjoyment of someone doing exactly what they were meant to do. Jack was in the truck bed, methodically picking off stragglers with his rifle, and I could see the same cold satisfaction in his movements. Mrs. Klugman, driving the police cruiser alongside us, wore an expression of contentment as she used the vehicle's push bar to crush zombie skulls like eggs. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were apex predators who'd found our perfect prey. The battle raged for another hour, our small convoy dancing between groups of infected. By the time the military finally opened fire with their heavy weapons, we'd killed over 200 zombies and broken the momentum of their advance. As the sun climbed higher over Cartridge Ferry, painting our town in deceptively peaceful morning light, I stood on the hood of my truck and surveyed what we'd accomplished. The streets were littered with bodies, some freshly killed, others showing the extended decay of the walking dead. The air was thick with gunsmoke and the sweet stench of decomposition. More than half of Cartridge Ferry's 1,500 residents were dead. Many more were missing, their fate unknown. But the town itself still stood, and the infected that had tried to claim it were nothing more than meat for the crows. "So what now?" Jack asked, reloading his rifle with practiced efficiency. I looked toward the horizon, where more smoke columns were rising from distant towns. The outbreak was spreading, consuming everything in its path like wildfire. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something approaching optimism. "Now we do what we do best," I said, checking my own weapon. "We hunt." Mrs. Klugman was smiling, actually smiling, as she counted her remaining ammunition. "My Harold always said there's nothing more dangerous than prey that learns to fight back." "We're not prey anymore," Reverend Wilms corrected, his Bible tucked securely in his tactical vest alongside spare magazines. "We're the thing that goes bump in the night." The military was beginning to establish a proper perimeter, but they weren't trying to contain us anymore. Instead, they were setting up supply lines and communication centers. Whatever their original orders had been, our demonstration of tactical effectiveness had earned us a new status. We weren't refugees to be rescued, or threats to be neutralized. We were assets to be utilized. The radio crackled with new communications, reports from other towns, other outbreaks, other desperate groups looking for guidance from someone who'd figured out how to win. Cartridge Ferry had become a beacon of hope in a world rapidly going dark. As I stood there in the morning sun, surrounded by the people who'd become my pack, my tribe, my fellow hunters, I understood that everything had changed. The old world was dying, consumed by an infection that turned human beings into mindless monsters. But from its ashes, something new was being born. Something harder, more focused, more deadly than anything the infected could possibly imagine. We were no longer Ryan Nygum the gun collector, Jack Brown the mechanic, Mrs. Klugman the retired teacher, or Reverend Wilms the small-town pastor. We were hunters, and there was plenty of prey still left to find. The battle for Cartridge Ferry was over. The war for humanity's future was just beginning, and God help me, I was looking forward to it.